Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new NSYNC reunion concert, or as it is also known, Trolls Band Together. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So every so often, kind of a cereal company tries to pull off a marketing stunt where they release an only marshmallows version of their breakfast product, and I have personally never indulged in one of those boxes, but I can imagine that the experience probably feels a lot like watching a Trolls movie, and just a whole lot of sweetness, not a whole lot of nutritional substance. And Trolls Band Together, the third entry and sort of the Trolls franchise, is definitely no different from that. Because in many ways, this is sort of an old school, like a throwback to how kind of animated kids films used to be, which sort of offers kids this is an unrelenting sugar rush of hyper stimulation to keep them entertained, while also tossing out some kind of dirty jokes or crude innuendos to, for the long suffering parents. And I think this is a movie that children will enjoy sort of the first one of those aspects, although I think a lot of parents might be a little less enthusiastic about the latter. Visually, this film has a lot going for it all the time, but I think mostly in a good way. I think the animation in this is great. Everything on screen is just very bright, very colorful, and just texture. Like the texture of like the trolls' hair and like even their skin is just so you almost feel it just by looking at the screen. And I think one of the advantages of sort of this franchise and like this how bizarre the Trolls universe really is that the animators just have kind of no restrictions to experiment, to try some crazy things, because even beyond just like the fun world building of like the troll kind of the troll land and sort of rainbows and colors and all the fun stuff, there's also in this movie there's like a sequence that takes place and there's almost like puppets. I think they're probably animated, but they look like they're just like almost Sesame Street type puppets. And then there's also like a sequence in this that morphs into a very sort of old school classic 2D style, sort of like pre-Disney bizarre cartoon. So visually there's always a lot of interesting stuff going on, and there's sort of creative ideas in this film. And kind of in contrast to sort of the relentless sort of the inventiveness of the visual kind of aesthetic, the plot itself here is actually quite simplistic. I don't think it's boring, but it's almost surprisingly uneventful. It kind of is, the story itself is telling like a got to get the band back together premise where a boy band broke apart, family boy band broke apart, but now they got to kind of go back and get the gang back together in order to sort of save one of their family members who's been held captive. And I think that itself is a fun idea. It's an idea that's been done obviously a lot of other times before, but sort of the result of that is there's just not a whole lot of actual action that happens. It very much sort of falls into this pattern of they find a new brother, they got to sort of talk through their differences, they do, and then they sing a song together, then they go look for the next brother, and you sort of rinse and repeat, and they sort of do that again and again with each brother without a whole lot of attention or necessarily kind of action beyond just sort of the drama of that relational dynamic. And even like the villains themselves, who I think are fine, don't actually intersect with like the main group of trolls until like the end, the climactic last act. So just sort of this movie is just kind of one that's surprisingly sparse on like action set pieces. And kind of as a result of that, really like the humor and then also the musical, the songs, end up doing a lot of the heavy lifting just to keep this movie moving, keep it interesting. And it's some of that's a bit of a mixed bag. I think like the humor itself, it's so rapid fire. There's this constant jokes being thrown at you and all the time that it can be hard to keep up. I will say that some of the gags are legitimately hilarious. I was laughing out loud at some of the jokes in the theater, although many of them are sort of like a meta commentary like on the music industry or things that I think a lot of parents will laugh at or be able to understand, even if like kids themselves won't get sort of the references or what's being said. And kind of more problematic than that is that there's also a handful of just sort of crude innuendos and crude sort of adult-oriented jokes that will hopefully also go over the heads of younger viewers, and we'll get into that in the next section. And while Trolls Band Together may not seem on the outside to have a whole lot in common with the Fast and Furious franchise, like those Vin Diesel movies, this movie is all about family. Because kind of beneath the surface of this, like the chaotic visuals and jokes and all that stuff that's going on screen, there is a warmth to this movie, sort of the more heartfelt, slower moments in this surprisingly work quite well, and there is depth to it. Like even the Branch and Poppy, who are the kind of the main two trolls in this franchise, their relationship actually has depth. Like there's a scene where they sort of clash for a second, kind of a misunderstanding, and then he kind of walks off and kind of rather than turn that into like a big brooding thing and a bunch of angst and needless drama, the characters sort of meet up. They talk about what happened. They sort of reaffirm the trust they have in themselves, and kind of unite again and carry on, better than before. And there is this sort of, I guess, a more maturity to some of the ways that the characters interact than you might expect from like a movie like this. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, probably more than as a parent you would hope for. As far as language, there's several things going on with this. I counted 2 or 3 uses of God or oh my God throughout here, and then also OMG is written in words at one point as well. There's a song lyric in this that contains the lyric feeling as good as hell. There are also several rude words, like a character say suck or sucky or idiot or narc or just sort of various kind of rude words that you don't necessarily probably want your kids repeating. There's a gag, which I'm just growing tired of. It seems to be in a lot of movies where a character clearly is dropping a heavy profanity, but it gets bleeped out, and you sort of see like the censored, the different signs appear over the mouth. And then there's also just sort of several moments where there's like substitute words or gosh darn or things that aren't profanities but clearly sort of are standing in for swear words or vulgar words. As far as violence goes, there's no violence. The most this movie gets is one of the trolls is sort of having his talent sucked from him to fuel the villains, and sort of in the process he's dying. But hey, this is a Trolls movie, so obviously he's going to be okay. But really beyond that, no other kind of violent moments. As far as sexuality, again, lots going on here as well. There's plenty of sort of sexual innuendos or jokes. Like a troll is married to, one of the trolls is married to like one of those larger kind of puppet-like creatures, and there's this sort of a conversation, a joke where they talk about how somehow they make it work, and in the context of what's happening, clearly that's the implication is sex. Then somehow they make it work, and the characters are questioning how. Also, there's like 2 newlywed ogres. They're called Bergens in the film, kind of ogre-like creatures that are kind of going off on their honeymoon. And at one point, they're captured by some trolls, and they're kind of tied up with ropes, leading the one of them to say, "I didn't think we'd both find ourselves tied up on our honeymoon." And kind of in that same sequence, as they're leading to their assumed death by these trolls, the one says, "Would it be weird if we made out?" And the other one says, "It would be weird if we didn't." And then they proceed to do precisely that. And then just characters say things, like, so hot, or there's a lyric, some lyrics that talk about, the way you turn me on, or just things that's probably beyond what a kid should be kind of immersed in or thinking about. So there's a lot of kind of needless innuendos throughout. Maybe the only other kind of content thing is there's sort of a repeated thing where kind of in this vehicle that the trolls are in, there's like a button, a hustle button, and when they push this button, they go off into this sort of that weird psychedelic 2D animation where they're transported by this character they call the Hustle Man, who essentially looks like kind of like a mystical genie character, and like he has sort of like a third eye in the middle of him, and he doesn't like do anything or speak, but obviously the visuals of that might be concerning for some parents. And then also there's mention of like a month-long yoga retreat, so maybe there's a couple other things to keep in mind. As far as things going on beneath the surface of this film, kind of lessons that maybe kids can take away, and hey, maybe even parents from watching this film, is that this movie is very much kind of all about learning to come together as a loving and supportive family. Both Branch and Poppy throughout this film reunite with sort of long-lost siblings and have to kind of deal with either overcoming, like adjusting their unrealistic expectations for how that relationship should be, or else sort of working through some of the baggage and some of the hurt feelings that have developed along the way. Because Brozone, which is like the boy band in this film, is comprised of Branch and then his 4 brothers. And the movie starts with them kind of on this quest to find the perfect family harmony, which in the context of the film is like a literal musical harmony that they can hit and, will wow the audience. But it's also a very clear just metaphor for, the family sort of becoming in harmony with each other, kind of learning to understand and kind of, live together despite their difference. Sort of the oldest brother in this, the leader, declares, if we aren't perfect, we're nothing. And since perfection is obviously impossible, they end up scattering and kind of going their own their own ways. And part of the problem for them in this movie is that each of the characters sort of has like a persona in the boy band. Like there's the heartthrob and the fun one and the leader. But these sort of these labels don't necessarily accurately, truly represent who these characters are. And it's difficult for the rest of the family to sort of see who they are beneath sort of these labels and these expectations, and the fact that some people change over time, and kind of throughout, obviously throughout the course of this film, and many life lessons and difficult conversations, they do kind of come to the realization that, as one character says, we don't have to be perfect to be in harmony. So this movie, despite some of the content stuff and despite just the all the stimuli, there is a very wholesome message at the core of it about family, about kind of learning to support family for who they are, or as one character says near the end, family is always worth it. So I think it is a good message that kids, and I think parents as well, can be encouraged by. So in the end, this movie kind of is exactly the type of movie that you would expect this movie to be, based on the previous Troll movies and just the trailers. Funnily enough, I took my kids to an early screening of this to help me with a review, and kind of inadvertently, the AMC theater that we attended wrongly started playing Blumhouse's horror movie Five Nights at Freddy's, which is a story for another day. But I'll be honest that kind of going into this movie, I don't know what was more terrifying for me, seeing that surprising horror movie or having to sit through one more of these Trolls movies. But I'll admit, I kind of almost against my own wishes, I did enjoy this movie. I do think that it's a fun movie. It's so bright and vibrant, and catchy songs and stuff, that it's hard not to feel some of that warmth and feel uplifted. Although unfortunately, I do think some of the more mature or adult-oriented content stuff does cast a cloud sort of over the whole thing, and it will be yeah, it just complicates what would otherwise, I think, be a wholesome, fun family film. But hey, let me know what you guys think. If you guys are interested in this movie, if you go see it with your family, if you enjoyed it, if you enjoyed the songs, or if you, like me as a parent, were a little frustrated with some of the adult jokes and things that, even if kids don't necessarily get it, it's just, hey, it's not necessary. But either way, jump in the comment section. Just let me know your thoughts. Have a conversation about that. And if you haven't done so, encourage you guys, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. I would just love to have you join with what we're doing here. We got movie reviews and podcasts and just other fun stuff. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with the world for Christ.